The Bible describes the marriage bed as undefiled, meaning sex within marriage is not unclean, but holy. Intimacy between a husband and wife is part of God's good design, and within that covenant there is tremendous freedom and joy, along with room for spontaneity and creativity.
Meet me in the upstairs guest bedroom in 2 minutes.
But when the setting shifts outside the home, especially into public spaces, things get more complicated. That's because your actions, while private between you and your spouse, can affect others in unintended ways, sometimes in deeply harmful ways.
He was naked.
In today's video, I want to help you think clearly about this subject. We'll talk through the biblical principles that must guide us, the boundaries that protect others, and the freedom that still exists for married couples who want to keep things spicy without defiling anyone else in the process. When thinking about sex outside the bedroom, especially in public or unconventional places, we need to begin with what Scripture clearly teaches. Not everything about this topic is black and white, but there are two principles that are. The first is that the couple must be married. In the Christian worldview, sex is reserved for a lifelong covenant between one man and one woman. Marriage is the key that unlocks freedom, joy, and experimentation in sex. The world asks questions like, was there consent, or were they of age? But Scripture sees the most important question as, were they married? If they're not married, it's sin.
That's a sin in the eyes of the church and the Lord.
It doesn't matter if you're over 18, if it's consensual, or if it takes place behind closed doors. God is the creator of sex, and He designed it for marriage. The second principle is that no one else can see or hear you. That kind of exposure defiles others. It can provoke lust or cause emotional harm, especially to a child.
Ew, ew, ew.
Single people are already fighting an uphill battle for purity in a hypersexualized world. You don't want to be another source of temptation. Jesus said, "Temptations to sin are sure to come, but woe to the one through whom they come. It would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were cast into the sea, than that he should cause one of these little ones to sin." That's how seriously God takes tempting people to sin. Beyond temptation, there's the sacredness of your marriage itself. Your spouse's nakedness belongs to you, and yours to them, no one else.
Thomas Marshall, he was the only guy I would ever see naked.
Now, of course, this does not mean that you must achieve total silence in your own home or in a locked hotel room. Couples with kids know you can do your best to minimize sound, but the likelihood that your children will overhear from another room at some point is high.
Daddy, when you're sleeping and you wake up, we can always hear you and you're like, and like groaning all the time.
That is different. This is about public exposure, where strangers, not part of your household, are involuntarily brought into something that they have no right to hear. Your home is your responsibility, whereas public space is shared. So here's the foundation. If you're not married, sex is completely off limits. If you can be seen or heard, it would be unethical to have sex in that public place. These are the non-negotiables. While Scripture speaks clearly, the question of legality is a different category altogether. One that can be murky, especially when governments step beyond the rightful authority. I'll talk specifically about my country, Canada, as an example, and use it to show how to think through the principles. Then you can do the research to see how this applies where you live. In Canada, sex in public is regulated at the federal level. If you're caught and your actions meet the legal criteria, you could be charged under Section 173 of the Criminal Code, which deals with indecent acts. Here's how that law is worded. Everyone who willfully does an indecent act in a public place in the presence of one or more persons, or in any place with intent to insult or offend any person. A Canadian law firm explains that two criteria must be met for someone to be convicted. First, the Crown must prove you intended to insult or offend the public, so your state of mind and your efforts to stay private matter. And then at least one person, not your partner, must have been present or could have seen you for the charge to stick. In short, if no one sees you and you genuinely intended to remain private, then legally you have not broken the law, even if someone accidentally stumbled upon you. That said, that doesn't remove the spiritual responsibility. God's standard is higher than man's. Even if no law is broken, defiling someone still matters to God. Now what that means is if you keep the two non-negotiables I mentioned in mind and are successful in never being seen, you have not broken the law. And according to that law, if you truly intended to be private and took precautions but you were accidentally caught, you probably still haven't broken the law, though harm would still have been done according to God's law. Government is ordained by God and given real authority to punish evil and protect the public. One of the legitimate things the government is responsible for is guarding against public indecency. If you get caught exposing yourself in public, even when accidental, you've done wrong. That's on you. You've sinned, broken the law, and defiled others. But on the other hand, if you are being responsible, taking sound precautions to ensure you're not seen or heard, and let's say your country has stricter regulations than Canada, they may be overextending their authority into safetyism. Sexual intimacy within the bonds of marriage belongs to the sphere of the family, not the government. The state has a duty and right to protect the public, but not to intrude into the intimate acts of a married couple who, though in public, are keeping it private and ensuring no one is harmed. In those cases, the government may be operating outside their authority, just like during COVID when some governments enforced masking and vaccine requirements. If no real harm is being done, and the state is simply enforcing a what-if standard in the name of safetyism, they may be disobeyed with a clear conscience. So in summary, if your country has strict laws against public sex, and your conscience doesn't permit you to disobey, then refrain. If your country allows for intimacy in public, so long as it remains unseen and unheard, then enjoy that freedom within the bounds of marriage. But if the law forbids it, and you believe it's overreaching into matters that rightly belong to the family, then you may still proceed without guilt. In that case, the state is no longer protecting the public, but micromanaging private affairs. Now that we've established that sex in public can be permissible under certain conditions, let's talk about safe spots. First, there are places that are simply not options because there's people around, and getting caught is more than just a possibility, it's likely. Inside of a movie theater or on public transportation would be completely inappropriate places for that reason. If you're wondering what safer spots could look like, here are some ideas. In your vehicle parked in abandoned or private areas, privacy tints and doing it at night make it even safer. In a forest or secluded field with thick high cover, like sunflowers, tall grass, or grain. In or behind natural barriers like caves, rock formations, or waterfalls, where visibility is blocked and foot traffic is rare. In a tent while camping far from others. In your backyard at night with high fencing. On a private boat far from shore and people. In your rented storage unit. In your private office with a lockable door after hours when the building is empty. You can get creative, but be responsible by avoiding anywhere where there's a decent chance of getting caught. The goal is to enjoy the freedom of intimacy within marriage while protecting others and honoring God. Sex is a gift, and married couples should delight in it. There's room for spontaneity, creativity, and playfulness. So go ahead and keep your marriage spicy, but also keep your testimony clean. If you want to go deeper on this topic, check out Intended for Pleasure by Ed and Gaye. It's a trusted and biblically grounded guide to sex within Christian marriage, written by a Christian physician and his wife. I've got a link to the book in the video description. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please click like as a way to say thanks. If you want more content like this in your feed, click subscribe directly below me. See you in the next video.